So obviously Edmund Lockhart, who is he? He's nicknamed as the father of modern forensic science. So forensics, when you guys think of forensics, what do you guys think of? Crime, okay. CSI, right? Something like that, like, fingerprints, right? Well, this guy, he had this idea called the exchange principle. Pretty much wherever you go, right, wherever scene you're at, you will leave some type of trace evidence, some type of, whether it's hair, DNA, fingerprints, or like when you're driving, you hit a car, right? The car exchanges paint on the other car, leaving the paint marker. That's what he teaches. He tells you that like pretty much whatever you come into contact with, there's always going to be some type of transfer material. So I touch this, boom, DNA is there. So like when I was a cop, when I do traffic stops, the first thing I do before I get to the vehicle and before I even call out the tag, I go up to look behind it and I put my fingerprint on the back of the car. People say, why? Well, in case that guy comes out of the car, shoots me, kills me, drives off, and then they need to come and find out where the car's at later on. They can dust the print for the car in the back to see my fingerprints on it. Most people don't know that, but that's the thing. So this principle also comes out into the digital realm too. So that's where digital forensics comes in. You have a cell phone, you have a laptop, you have a computer. Whatever you're doing on there, that's essentially an extension of you, especially these days. Like everything that we do, like right now, who has a cell phone? Who has a smartwatch on them? You're carrying something electronic with you, but wherever you go, that electronic data is probably being pushed out somewhere or recorded, such as GPS, location, Wi-Fi. If you have your Wi-Fi on, it's reaching out, talking to the router, saying, hey, I'm open, I'm here. And then if you connect to it, that's when the router's like, hey, connect to me. All right, you're connected. So you're exchanging information constantly without you even knowing. So that's where Edmund Lockhart and his principle comes in for digital forensics. So what is digital forensics? Honestly, it's scientific. It's, you're looking at things from a scientific approach. You're extracting data from electronic devices. That's pretty much it, But ultimately, what you want to do is not just go in there and touch everything and just like, oh, look at all these pictures, look at all these videos I have on this phone. You have to approach it where you're preserving the evidence, because later on, if you try to present that information or data in court, they're going to say, well, you contaminated it. Like, you touched the evidence. This is not admissible. So we have to preserve it in a way so that we can later do appropriate analysis on it. So when we're conducting an investigation, we collect it, we identify it, and then we validate the information that comes from that device so that later on we can say, hey, this is the bigger picture, this is what this person did at this time and this date for this reason, or for what we believe to be this reason. And
yeah, I get this one. Okay, great. So to sum up digital forensics and the three basic components that you're going to perform, per se, there's going to be other tasks, but the three main ones boil down to these things, right? We have acquisition. What is it we're collecting? Are we taking your mobile device and your iPad? Are we looking to collect data off of there? Are we taking some computer, right, and collecting data off of that? Or maybe we're identifying a drone or some other device that has electronic data, right? We're going to figure out how to acquire that. Now, there's a lot of different acquisition methods and types of images we can get. Kind of goes beyond the scope of this sort of introductory conversation. It's getting a little more technical, but it can be anything from trying to acquire everything on the actual device, every bit and byte on there, to maybe a targeted file collection, right? So the first step is acquisition. Now, when we have that acquisition, we have those files that we want to analyze and take a look at, we're going to do what's called parsing. Okay, we're going to basically take that data, what timestamps can we identify, what context can we create. For example, who here has a Windows computer at home? 1, 2, 3, 4. No Windows computers? Really? Nope. Yeah, well, Mac doesn't do that good of a job, but Windows is your big brother. Windows, if you open up a Word document, there's about at least four different forensic artifacts that I could go find that shows me that I can tie that username opening that Word document, for example. Right? It does a very good job of recording what you do. That's why when people use Windows, well, honestly, if you have Windows, forensics is pretty easy at that point. You have Mac. Mac does some recording and things of that nature, but it's not nearly as detailed as Windows. And when you get to Linux, there's actually much less recording going on. Things become a little more difficult to figure out. But Windows is the popular format, especially in enterprise business. So like you mentioned, we worked at the bank and we did forensics together on that, and most things were Windows-based systems, right? So we actually did a really good job of getting a lot of people fired. That was kind of our
Whoa.
Hey, a lot of times our end results would go to HR, the role of security, and people had a lot of decisions made based on the work that we did. Now, to be fair, we have story time. I do have a good story that wasn't quite the case, but we'll share that in a little bit. Then after we get to parsing, which is kind of the fun stuff, that's when you really especially if you're tech guys or tech gals like us, we're digging in, we're figuring it out. We're like, all right, we figured out this person, they committed fraud, or hey, they tried to hide from us, we got them. Like that's the fun part. Then once we got that, now we get to this guy. Really more like the reporting part. Nobody really likes to write the report. That's the not fun part. Unless you're like one of those, no offense, weird governance, regulance, compliance folks who loves policy and loves documentation, which is a very small percentage of people on the planet, I believe. Reporting is the not fun part. That's like, I guess I'll get to the report, right? Now the figuring out the puzzle and all that, that's the fun part. Go ahead and hit me the next slide then. All right, so here's a much more, kind of friendlier, more professional slide from our stuff, which by the way, we're not all that professional, we haven't told already. But from the digital forensic process at a high level, we need to identify the sources of evidence. For example, a typical case at the bank that we had, we would maybe have an image from the host machine that they were using. Depending on the activity, we may acquire an image of the actual memory from the system. The bank did a really good job of logging things that they were doing, so they would forward those log events to a centralized log manager. We would collect logs off of those systems too, and also they collected network traffic, so just your general internet traffic was being collected too. So in case we needed to obtain that for evidence, we were able to do so. And many times we were able to prove 8 ways to Sunday whether you performed an action or not based on the allegation. I would say definitely more than 90% of the time, which is being very conservative, we're able to support the allegations. Right? Every once in a while there wasn't evidence to do it, but and sometimes we would prove the other direction, but more than 90% of the time we were able to prove the allegation. Then like you talked about before, we're going to preserve while we acquire. We're going to figure out what we need to acquire, collect that evidence, working to preserve that. Preserving that is through a technique called hashing. Has anyone ever heard of hashing before? Okay, good, so you've heard of hashing. At least half the room has. So basically that's a way that we're taking a likely unique identifying string, right, that represents that data set. And then so like, what's your name, sir? I'm sorry. Robbie. Let's say Robbie is opposing counsel, he's a forensic examiner for opposing side. I give that image to him. He should be able to hash that image and he gets the same exact value that I have. That can show that the evidence is preserved, the same data set that I looked at, the same data set that Robbie's looking at, right? And once we do that, we hit that analysis part, that's where we're figuring out the puzzle, we're finding the smoking gun, maybe we're sending someone to jail, maybe we're getting someone fired, maybe we're getting someone out of going to jail. Maybe we're preventing someone from getting fired. Maybe we're saving and impacting a life. Maybe we're doing stuff that leads to arrest. All these things are impacts that you and I had as we did this work. And that's what we want to get across is the impact of the work. And then of course we get to the not fun stuff, the documentation, albeit the most important part of it, right? Because I'll tell you, I did all this awesome technical work. I'm like, yeah, the guy, tried to evade security controls by doing X, Y, and Z. He was able to successfully exfiltrate the data to his personal accounts via this method, and I had it. And the investigator of the case was like, yeah, I don't really care. Can you just tell me the data went out or not? That's like a really heartbreaking feeling. Like I put hours into this thing, and you just like summed it up to one question. Like I wanted to cry a little bit. You know what I mean? Like I was very sad because I put all this effort into it, and he didn't care. But for his case perspective, of course he didn't care, right? He just wants to get on to the next thing, right? So, but documentation is important because I'm a very gullible person. I'm very naive, okay? I've never had someone lie to me before. I didn't work law enforcement like you did. I came from public sector where I did forensics as an aspect of my work, right? I may have felt HR, but at the bank was my first time doing it full time. I never had someone lie directly to my face, like in that regard. And like, I was like, wow, people actually do lie to people right to the face. Like I was really surprised, and it made me mad. And Yui will tell you, if you make us mad, like we do our job well. When you make us mad, then like okay, well then you're gonna lie to me. Now I'm really gonna go dig deeper, right? And you don't want digital forensic people digging deeper on you. Next slide. This is you, sir. This is you. The Dauber standard. Yeah, you can take the Dauber standard.
Dauber standard. So before we get into the digital forensics evidence types, and even just talking about evidence in general, how can it be evidence? what does the court want from, digital forensic experts? Well, the case between Docker and Merrill really sets the standard. Here you can see the criteria that the court wants before evidence can be admitted, such as can the evidence be tested, can the methodologies and the techniques that you use in forensic science be tested, is it peer reviewed, has it been published, what is the error rate, how accurate is it, what is the percentage, are these techniques standardized, is it maintained, are these techniques already existing? Is it widely accepted within the forensic community? All these questions are relevant. And this isn't only for evidence and also techniques, but it's also for this is why certification is important. Certification, when you get certified, it proves hey, this person knows what they're doing. This is a community, everybody's going out, reaching, learning from the same source. So it is standardized at the end of the day. So that's why you have to, the whole process, the whole digital forensic process is not just hey, where's the evidence coming from? Is it hashed correctly? Is the hashes matching? Did you do it from a forensically sound method? But you also have to validate the tools that you are using. So if you download some random tool off GitHub and you never validated it, and it's parsing different data, the next thing you know, you're going up, in court and you're testifying, and it's showing one thing, and then the defense has their own forensic expert and they have their own tools, and they're saying, hey, the tool that you use here is reporting an inaccurate data. How do you validate it? How do you know this is accurate? That's one of those things. And one of the key cases out there that shows why this is important is the Casey Anthony case, where
So close to home. So close to home.
very close. If you guys are familiar with that, look it up sometime. One of the key things why she won is because of forensics, digital forensics. But is your methodology documented? That's why reporting is so accurate. You have to literally say how you did, what what time you did it, and how you did it. So that's the Docker standard.
Real quick. Who here knows the Casey Anthony case? Have you heard of the Casey Anthony case? So only two. So so this is an issue that happened locally here, right? Where her kid was killed. There was a court case. I don't know, was it 10, 15 years ago now?
Yeah.
And he's right. It was digital forensics the reason why she got off, and not because it was on her side. It was because of the method of reporting and the way the testimony was given. It just proved to be incredible. It wasn't necessarily untrue, but it was given in so much doubt that everything else just kind of fell apart. So that goes to the importance of not just the testimony in court, but also the importance of your forensic testimony and the analysis that you did too.
Yeah, the web artifacts, it was in that case, the significant thing was
Internet.
Yeah, internet history visits, and one of the tools that law enforcement used stated that, or at least reported that she had visited a website where it was like chloroform.
Yeah, she was searching. It was specifically searches for chloroform.
Yeah, chloroform. It showed 17 visits, but in reality it was one visit.
Yeah. Now, if you think about this, now I don't remember how exactly it operated back then, but when you type in Google, what happens? It starts autofilling for you, right? Right. And I will tell you from a forensic perspective, when I have looked at cases, I could see that actually happening, where those autofill searches are just populating as searches. So it might look like multiple searches, but really, you have to look at the timestamps of when it's occurring and kind of concatenate that down to really one search.
Yeah.
Any other comments on that, Yui?
I'm good.
You want to do this one or me?
I'll go with this one. So these are all the types of digital forensics out there. You guys obviously know about computer forensics. Something happens on a computer, hard drive, RAM within the computer, which is random access memory. Anything related with computers, that's computer forensics. Network forensics is kind of in the middle between computers, but mainly like packet captures. Anything with NetFlow, log analysis. Mobile forensics, that's with cell phones, drones, Internet of Things, SD cards, thumb drives. And cloud forensics, obviously, anything related to internet web apps or services and platforms out there, such as AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure.
You're going to take this one? All right. So to focus a little bit more on the computer forensic side, so this is going to be evidence, again, specifically found in computers. And when we're talking about that, we're talking about what's stored on the hard drive. Now, hard drives nowadays, A lot of times they're actually akin to memory. A lot of it's NVRAM, they're SSDs, sometimes they're even soldered onto the motherboard. If you don't know what that is, that's okay, just sit back, relax, take in the information. The point is this is data that's being stored in a physical, persistent way on the system, okay? And this data is something that we can acquire to make sense of it. And some of the artifacts that we may look for are deleted files, we may want to look at your internet web history. I mean, if you work corporate forensics, one of the common cases you're going to get is people just looking at inappropriate material at work. I mean, this is what it is. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's funny. Actually, they're really funny cases to look at. I mean, when you're like, oh, like that's interesting that you would do that during your work time or in public like that. You do you, I guess. But someone's got to do those investigations, right? So a lot of times, internet history is a big one. But not just for that. Like there could be other things too, like interacting with certain web applications. Maybe they're doing some sort of work that's on an internal web application that they didn't do something right. Things of that nature. Documents and files, I mentioned, like I could already show you at least 4 or 5 different forensic artifacts that show you opened up a Word document. When I say you, I mean your user, right? Not only that, some of those forensic artifacts can tell me how you opened up. So have you ever in Windows, like for you Windows folks, have you ever gone to like file open, it's like, hey, how did it know this was the folder I was in? Or how does it know that this is a recent thing that I did? Or like if you click like a little icon, the taskbar, it pops up with 10 things. Well, that's Windows recording all those things, and those are forensic artifacts, and how I can tie that directly to your username, right? And that gives me power. Not only that, there's a bunch of other metadata or data about the data or data within that data that's embedded that can tell me, oh, well, this was ran with a command line activity, or it was ran under these privileges, or it was also stored here. So there's a lot of other ancillary data we can get from that. Windows registry, if you're not familiar with it, the registry, that's okay, but think of it as your settings database in Windows. It's a chock full, gold mine of forensic artifacts. And of course, there's file system metadata too. There's a file on every Windows system since Windows NT that's called the master file table. Think of it as essentially the post office for the computer. It tells me exactly where every single file resides on the system. Even deleted files will still show up there in regards to the file at least existed here. It just has an indicator that shows that it was deleted, right? And then speaking of deleted files, let me ask this question. If you go into a Windows machine, or really even a Mac machine or a Linux machine, and you delete a file, is that file actually deleted? Right, no, it's actually not. Good, that's a good answer. I'm alluding to that, right? If you just go and you do the basic delete, it's still gonna be there. It's just marked to be okay to be overwritten. It can still be easily recovered at that point. Right? Now, if you go in to use a special tool where you do like a shift and delete or your empty recycle bin, yeah, then you're actually starting to remove it. I personally use a software tool to actually zero out that data content myself. But the point is, a lot of things can be done to do that. Now, here's some brief mention of tools used. I'm not going to focus on that because we have some slides that actually talk about tools, so we can go into the next slide real quick. Network forensics. So you also mentioned network forensics. If you're working more as a SOC analyst or incident responder, not law enforcement per se, but more in that corporate, private sector field, even public sector, but not law enforcement focused, you're probably going to actually do a lot more with network forensics than you think. One of the things like we talked about was full packet capture, actually collecting the entire packet content of the organization and looking at that. It is possible. However, some of the issues are costs associated with that, data and storage retention are issues with that. So there's going to be some places where you're not going to have that. But I can promise you, you have things like firewalls, you have things like proxies, you're logging this sort of information where you can identify IP addresses that we were communicating with. We can identify connections occurring. We may also have things like intrusion detection systems. We're able to analyze signatures and behaviors of systems and identify things of that nature. And then there could be other alerts and logging that occur on the actual endpoint that can show us that network-related information too. For example, Microsoft Defender or CrowdStrike or SentinelOne, those are what are called EDR, endpoint detection response platforms. I call them black boxes. If you've heard of a black box on a plane that records everything that's occurring, that's essentially what these are for computers. They record essentially every single action that's occurring on the system, and it's a chock full of forensic data. In fact, when we had that at the bank, like a lot of times we could just start an indoor investigation if we wanted to with that platform. But the point is, it will give you a lot of that network-related artifacts, even though it's on the host itself, or it's being stored up in our cloud, right? So you can actually get that information without actually having to go to a network device, which is nice. So, anything else I want to mention on network forensics? The only thing I'll say one of the issues that it has is encryption. So, quick show of hands, you guys familiar with encryption generally speaking? Let me ask this, is anyone in like an IT or cybersecurity or technology degree program? Okay, so we got 3, so you guys probably know what I'm talking about, at least, right? Encryption is so we can protect, so people typically can protect the data, people just can't see it, right? That's what it's used for. However, if we're people trying to investigate things, that also, well, hinders us because we also can't see the data. So we have to put controls and mechanisms in place to safely decrypt said encrypted data so we can either copy it off or view it and then re-encrypt it and send it out the network. So that's just another one of the issues that we'll face. I think we'll stop there for network forensics and go on to, I think, mobile, right?
Yeah.
Let you handle the mobile one.
So we just talked about computer network, now it's mobile forensics. So mobile forensics involves everything that is mobile, right? Cell phones, drones, smartwatches, tablets. It's really, cell phones are so intrusive, like these type of investigations are so intrusive because when we get a cell phone, we pretty much get your life. You know, like everything's on there, your text messages, your pictures, your videos, websites you visited, all your social media, contacts, where you've been. Like, I tell everybody all the time, like, you know, if you're ever in a setting where they're asking for your cell phone, it's your privacy. Just, you know, whatever you value more. Just be careful, because they'll get your data. You know, when I was a cop, same thing. Search warrants, consent. I feel bad when, you know, the bad guys consent, because it's like, you're about to, like, your life's about to be undone. But anyways, whatever. So some cool artifacts I've just listed right there, you know. But I want to talk more about application data. So application data is like data from things that you use, such as like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, that type of stuff you don't really see in the front end. In the back end, though, there's much more being done, such as what time you opened the app, what time you shared an image, what time you started to look at another person's profile, what time you started. It gets really intrusive and it gets really weird, you know. And it's scary because like people like us, we get to see and have like full insight into your life, and really we get to know who you are, you know, because it's a very intimate thing. It's an extension of you. So some of the tools that we use for mobile forensics is Celebrate. Primarily Celebrate is the main player, but there's things such as Great Key and Magnet out there that they provide things like Axiom. What is Great Key? Yeah, Great Key. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and Magnet acquired them, so now they're kind of one and the same.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, that's right. They acquired each other now, so or Magnet acquired Great Key. But yeah, mobile forensics, great. Not like it's primarily law enforcement uses it. In the public sector, they don't use it often. Law enforcement all the time. But it's,
like 98% of law enforcement cases, like if you talk to your general, like it's going to be mobile.
so I like extracted like 400 and something devices when I was in law enforcement, and out of those, I'd say probably 90% of that was being cell phones. So yeah, creepy stuff, cool stuff, awesome stuff. It's fun. It's fun, but you know.
The only thing I'll add to that, you can speak because I shared it with you, but you want to talk about my Pokemon Go tool I made?
You talk about that.
You want me to talk about it?
Yeah, you talk about it.
All right, so part of my Dakota State, I had to like do a project, and I'm really good at forensics, but mobile was one of the places I would have enough experience in. I wasn't law enforcement, like I said. So I'm like, I'm gonna dig into this a little bit. So I grabbed my daughter's phone, I'm like, I'm gonna do some forensic, I'm gonna create a forensic tool for Pokemon Go. I love Pokemon Go, it's a fun game, right? And I was actually like, oh crap. Like when I figured out how much stuff this data is actually recorded. So I took my daughter's phone, I figured out how to extract the data. She had an iOS, I think 15 something at the time. This is on my GitHub, by the way, so you're actually free to like watch my video and how I did it, get the Python code and all that sort of stuff too. But essentially, I had a tool that automatically went in, it finds the correct database for the Pokemon Go app. So presumably, you have to have the mobile forensic image, you have to extract the database, or the Pokemon Go app out at least. And then we'll look through that folder, find the database, extract the contents of that database, and then there's GPS coordinates built in. And I thought it might be like, okay, your common charters are at such and such. No, it's actually much more intrusive than that. It's like, hey, the service started. Hey, this is like a check-in. Hey, but with every single one of those like background service actions, it actually plotted the GPS coordinate. So I could actually show along the I-4 path corridor when we were traveling to our vacation stay. I think it like two Memorial Days ago, when we were staying at the Gaylord for a convention, right? So like, and then when we were there, like I had like thousands of like little pins at the hotel, and then the day that they went to Disney, I had pins where they were at in Disney too. And it's all doing that without her interacting. That's the key thing, without her interaction on the phone. So okay, cool, that's creepy. what's the practical concept? Let's say you use law enforcement and they come across a victim or subject and they happen to have that app on their device. If they do, there's millions and millions and millions of people who have that, right? Even if they're not using it, it's still recording that data. There could be that legitimate data that can maybe help you with a lead or a clue to where they were or where they might be going or patterns of life. And that's really, I think, one of the key things with forensics is you're figuring out patterns of life. How do they operate, right? So that's the only thing I think I'll talk about that. But yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool little project and kind of scary, but I think there's a real practical application for it. So the next one, is that you or is that me?
That's you.
Cloud forensics? Okay, so with cloud forensics, really, people get kind of crazy about cloud forensics, and there are some nuanced differences, but by and large, it's the same. Really, the cloud is just someone else's machine up there, right? But if you're using something like, let's just, I break it up into two parts, and go ahead and go to the next slide, because I think we have it there. Yeah, so I break it up into two parts. There's infrastructure as a service, and then there's software as a service. If I say, and platform as a service too, but really platform as a service, even infrastructure as a service can be kind of commingled a little bit. Where infrastructure is just, you're getting access to hardware, you can put your own operating system. Platform is you start off with your operating system there. And then the software as a service is really you're just getting access to some application. So let's break that up. Software as a service. Who here has used Dropbox before? Who here has used Box? Who here has used like Gmail or whatever, right? All that is considered software as a service. There's forensic artifacts that can be gathered from that. And in case you're curious and you use Google services, go look up, you can Google Google Takeout. You can basically acquire your own data, right? And you can figure out what's all stored on there. And you might be surprised what Google's storing on you, okay? So they're, like from a law enforcement perspective, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they can get subpoenas and warrants and things like that submitted to Meta now it's Facebook, or it was Facebook, now it's called Meta. They can submit things to Meta, they can submit things to your ISPs, they can submit things to Dropbox or whatever and gather that data from it. That's all focused on the application side. Now, as we focus on the infrastructure and platforms as a service, there are some nuances when it comes to like Azure and AWS, which are the two big players out there. There's also Google Cloud Platform and then some other like, I don't want to say niche, but lesser ones that just don't have the market share. Couple things. If it's virtualization, you can easily just grab that data if you have the admin access from there, and we can process that immediately. If you don't have that sort of access, we can do basically traditional forensic methods to get tools installed on there in order to acquire the data that we need to acquire. But as long as we kind of have admin level access or someone with admin access, we can work with them to acquire it from the quote unquote back end and obtain that data for forensic analysis. Because really at the end of the day, again, these are just computers that are just living somewhere else. That's really all it is. There's nothing really magic about the cloud. It's just someone else's computer somewhere else on the planet. That's really all it is. Now, things like with AWS and Azure, you can actually go back a slide if you want, Duy, that's the wrong way. Yes, that one. Now, when we have artifacts like access logs, configuration files, and some of these other things, AWS, Azure, and those other ones, they will have some of those kind of cloud logging things, so we could acquire that and we can add that to our investigation to help with correlation, corroboration, all that sort of stuff. So between actually accessing the system, actually accessing the platform for Azure or AWS or something like that, and then we can get that. We can go ahead and skip to the next ones. I think it's you, right?
Yes.
Tools one, you're gonna take tools?
Oh, that's all right. So, in digital forensics, there's a plethora of tools out there for you. I'd say get everything you can, use everything you can, but before you use it, make sure you validate. You have to validate the tools to actually, know what it's actually doing. Because when you have a situation where you have to testify, you don't know what tool you're using or how it's being done. You go up there and look like an idiot. So some things out there, the top two are free. Autopsy, Sleuth Kit. Honestly, it's really, really great free tool out there for our forensics. FTE imagers, that's good for imaging, cloning, and really you can see the basic stuff like what's deleted, what's not. You can look at the bytes, byte level. X-Ways, really great tool. I don't have much experience with it, but I know it's really strong. Honestly, I like to real forensic here to use it, but
So X-rays is kind of like the Swiss Army knife. Like you really have to know what you're doing. Like they're literally like thousands and thousands of options, and it's made by a German guy. His English is very like Germanized, so like the descriptions oftentimes don't make sense. But you have to really have a good understanding. And when all other tools fail, we typically go to X-rays.
And I like to say it's not as intuitive like as like Magnet Axiom, like your tool. Like if you know what artifact you want, you know where to go for your evidence of what artifact does. Axiom will just like help you do like sniper forensics. Like you just type in something, you know what you want, takes you there. So Wireshark, this one's more for like network forensics, looking at packet capture. SIP workstation, that's a combination of different forensic tools in one little VM. They also have it for mainline now too. Right?
Yeah, so the cool thing about SIFT is it's from SANS. It's actually a free VM that you can either download or you could like set like a Docker container and do like an apt-get to install all the tools. But it's a Linux-based distribution that has a lot of free, not a lot, all free tools that you could actually leverage to complete a forensic investigation if you had to. It's very good. Next one.
And they got the mainline one as well. But yeah, next. So this is just a little preview of what autopsy looks like. So here in this panel right here, it's showing all the directories within whatever device is looking at. It's looking at volume 2. So on the very left pane right there, you can see the images, the volumes, and it breaks down into file types and also recent files. And it's an easier way, an easier view of looking. So in forensics, we typically look at things in hex view or in try to see what that is there. Like, it looks like gobbledygook. You can't tell what it is, but eventually you do forensic long enough that becomes something. It's like your Neo from the Matrix. You start understanding.
True.
Thanks.
This is an example.
So same thing here. That's a imager. It's free. You can download it. You can play around with it. This is Axiom. I personally really like Axiom. I've used it in law enforcement. Used it at Chase. I get so much data quickly that I don't have to waste time sifting through everything else. It's just give me what I want.
I will say I'm a Magnet fanboy too, and I was a fan of Magnet before they were known as Magnet Forensics.
IEF.
It was called IEF by JAD Software, and I used to talk to the owner directly. But those days were long gone. But I actually had a story where, real quick, I was doing forensic examination of a Linux-based system, and it actually reported one of the artifacts incorrectly. And then so it took, like we talk about the important tool validation to say, hey, something doesn't line up here, and I used another tool to validate the time. I was actually reporting the time incorrectly for one of the artifacts, which could be important for a case.
Story time.
You want me to lead or you want me to lead?
You can lead. I'll let you lead.
Want me to lead?
Yeah.
All right, so I know we're kind of running short on time here, so I'm going to do real quick. So two quick stories that I find very successful and that brought me great impact and great joy. One of them I have to keep very general for the nature of the people and the folks involved. But we were engaged with a 3-letter agency where we were working, and we were asked to look at basically hacker infrastructure. And they're like, hey Ryan, here's this Linux-based system, we want you to do some analysis on it. I said, okay, fine, great. So I'm gonna do this analysis on this Linux-based system. I started looking at this Linux-based system, like, why am I finding Windows-based artifacts? Why? They told me it was Linux. I see the Linux, but then I'm getting all this Windows-based stuff. Well, upon digging on it, what had happened was, they did the quick format, okay? So they quick formatted the system, and so when you do that, you actually are just saying, hey, it's okay to overwrite all this stuff, but we don't need to go through and delete everything. So in its previous life, this system was a Windows-based system, and this Windows-based system was actually being used by threat actors for staging. I found the phishing email campaigns, I found PII that they stolen from data, from people. They had job-related scams going on. They had these pictures of all these little mini-mark sort of things with crypto machines because that's how they were getting their money out. And ultimately, on this Linux system with all this deleted Windows data, which was really the important stuff we cared about, we found some cryptocurrency wallets that actually led to arrests somewhere. So that was one of the cool, impactful things that I got to work on in doing that. I know I'm kind of summarizing that very quickly, but there was a lot of work and stuff done to get to that end result. The second coolest thing that I ever did is, like I said, we got a lot of people fired, and honestly, I felt really bad about it a lot of times. We're getting all these people fired. I'm like, very rarely it's okay, something good happens. Well, I got this one case that was somewhere in the United States, and essentially the person was being prosecuted for elder abuse, but not like they punched an old lady, more like they were calling her for neglect on the finances of the old lady. Now, I don't know the story of the old lady, but I'm investigating the possible neglect. And essentially, the work I did, I showed that the user did their due diligence, they looked at the proper policy. I actually showed them going through the policy during the time of relevance. I have them in their customer service system, accessing their customer data. I have them accessing the correct application to report said issue. I identify that they have previously reported elder abuse and things of that nature. I think that what had happened was, though, is they just never hit the submit button, but I can actually show them going back and forth between the customer data and the correct application during the time when she supposedly said she reported it. And the system never actually sent like an email confirmation saying, hey, thank you for your elder abuse report, or anything like that. Like, it was just a number that popped up on the screen, right? And I was able to tie a bunch of data together to really show, well, I can't prove that she submitted it, I could prove that she was in the ballpark and that it would look like she was at least trying. Well, the prosecution, or I should say the detective who was prosecuting, didn't care about that and just continued to prosecute anyway. And that actually was being set for trial and things, and we're getting lawyers involved, like, you're gonna have to go and testify or at least get deposed and all that, and I'm like, all right, cool, whatever, you know what I mean? I've only ever been in one other, like you've probably been in a lot, like real stuff. Like, I've only ever testified on like an administrative hearing case, which was nothing burger, really. Someone looking at something they shouldn't look at work. While in real case, it's nothing burger compared to homicide, like huge stuff, you know what I mean? But I'm ready to go to court over this, I'm not worried about it. My work ends up going to the judge, and the judge ends up dropping the case, based on my review. So the work I did had the impact of someone not going to jail, which is a really good feeling at the end of the day, considering how many people get fired. You know what I mean?
It's really good, because like what that prosecutor or that person did is probably political, you know?
Yeah.
Why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and I don't want to say like necessarily the place, but there was a predominantly elder population where they were living. This was a specific unit for elder abuse. Like, I think there was, like you said, a lot of zealousness behind it, but it probably wasn't due, right? And that's how I felt about it, even after doing my own research on the detective and things like that.
It was wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have done that.
So like those are really two quick stories. I have a lot of other fun stories like that probably can't talk about that are appropriate since I'm being recorded, but those are two of mine. Did you want to share any of your stories, Dewey?
Yeah, I'll share this one. So, one of the cases, trigger warning, it's a homicide. Actually both of them are homicide. This case kind of sucks. Anyways, so this case pretty much, what happened was, it was like baby mama issues. This guy got jealous of, this girl talking to another dude. She was pregnant. He decides to roll up with one of his boys, grabs, one of his boys has a gun. Anyways, she ends up dying, it's really bad. It's really bad. I wonder if I have, want to do it? Yeah, gotcha. So pretty much what happened was, we had a suspect. He said he did not shoot his baby mama, but the guy in the car, supposedly who owned the gun, said that the suspect did shoot. We didn't really have any other way to prove it, So luckily, one guy had an Apple Watch. And this is when the Apple Watch first came out. We didn't really have that much artifacts. We had to do some testing and some experimentation. So we got the iOS health artifacts from your iPhones, and then we looked at the Apple Watch data as well and compared it. Well, one person at the time, when the car pulled up, according to the GPS of both cell phones, the car pulled up to the house, and then one person actually had footsteps, about 30 footsteps, which, we tracked it and did some estimations, about 30 footsteps to the front of the house. Well, the person got shot up through the door. And, she got shot. There was like 6 kids inside the house already. Luckily, none of them got injured. But we were able to prove at the end of the day that this person was the one that, did the shooting. So that's just based off of iOS and Apple Watch alone. Another homicide that happened was, this is pretty, let's see, this is just like a random act. This guy, the suspect wanted to burglarize this really rich area, get some jewelry, get some silver, and, pawn it. Well, he ended up going to a really, really prominent person, like the ex-city commissioner. Went inside the house and bound up the ex-city commissioner and her husband. And next thing you know, cops called out. We see them; they're all stabbed to death, like menacing, like blood splatters everywhere. So imagine the force, of the weapon going in and out. And the blood splatter had to go, up on the roof. So we didn't really have any data. We didn't have a suspect. We didn't have anything. Some guy decides to rat out his friend and say, hey, he's the one that did it. Well, other than that, we don't have any other evidence. Luckily, the suspect was stupid and he took pictures of the victims before they died, and he had deleted it, but he thought he deleted it. It went into the trash bin. So forensically, we were able to, recover those images and show the time and date before, they were killed. So that one's recent too. That's a really rough one because the images were recent. Anyways, those are just some of the stories that we have to deal with digital forensics. Like in law enforcement, it's always going to be bad, but in public sector, you get some more funny laughs. So that's something to consider too.
Yeah.
So obviously in careers, you can have digital forensics. Law enforcement can be a civilian analyst, you can be a detective, like I was, and do digital forensics. There's a couple of digital forensics in legal. You can be one for the defense attorney. You can be one for even like lawyers. They'll do digital forensics for digital forensic cases. It's a hot thing right now. For malware analysts, Brian can talk about that one real quick.
Yeah, and sake of time, I'm going to just kind of go through these really quick. So a lot of these principles and concepts are going to be the same. You're going to have to, and really it's not just about the type of forensics it is, it's more about your methodology and your investigative, curious nature. That's really one of the most important things that you're going to need to have if you want to be in this field. You've got to be inquisitive, you got to be curious, and you got to be not afraid to jump in. So you talked about the law enforcement, legal, really kind of putting together like malware. Well, focusing on malware real quick is you're getting really deep into an actual binary. You're going to try to deconstruct that binary, figure out the code functions and things like that. And I've done that, and it's a lot of work. I've wasted a lot of hours doing it. And bad guys like to put code in that will run you around and not figure out the thing. But I mean, I've done cool things like when I run malware through a sandbox, we find all these artifacts, but then when I review it statically, I'm like, hey, it has this other code function that tries to steal cryptocurrency. Maybe that's important. Maybe we should know about that, right? But kind of tying in things like incident response, security operations center analysts, a lot of that's going to be kind of similar, and where maybe you're doing targeted forensics is going to be more about, did something get compromised? Do we have to worry about this asset? What targeted data are we pulling? You're not doing it from the law enforcement perspective, you're more looking from the compromised breach perspective. Consultant is basically someone that's going to come in and they can do any swath of this stuff. Malware analysis, full forensics like law enforcement might do, or maybe it's targeted. And then, of course, just going to corporate and private, the same sort of thing is kind of similar to consultant with your slide. Am I taking this one or you don't?
You can take those.
All right, so like I said, you want to get into this field, you've seen CSI, it is nothing like CSI. I was a fan of 24, Chloe O'Brien on the computer. Yeah, we're not getting that port, we're not breaking that connection, we're not breaking that encryption in like 20 seconds. Not gonna happen, Jack. You got 24 years, more than 24 hours, that's probably gonna happen, okay? So, but like I said, the most important thing is to be inquisitive, to be curious. You need to have that investigative mindset. Why is this here? As I tell my students, I tell people, you gotta tug on that thread. Is this really the end of the line? What happens if you tug on that thread? I've tugged on the thread before on a case that was just like a basic, someone sent an email out, now all of a sudden I'm proving that they're running a whole other business and they're referring themselves business from where they were. Like, that's probably a conflict of interest, probably not okay, right? I found someone who was running their whole like collectible comic collection shipping through a branch, right? So they were using their branch shipping. I was actually able to calculate how much money that they spent on all their shipping that they were doing for their own business. So, and sometimes like those cases, you just find something completely else, but it's all about tugging on that thread to figure out what happened, right? You gotta know and understand how computers work. That's very important. You gotta know, how does Windows store this artifacts? If you interact with a file, what footprints, what fingerprints is it leaving behind that you can go and recover, okay? Command line. I know we may not be talking to the most technical crowd here, and this is maybe a more advanced concept, but if you can get familiar with command line functionality, that allows you to speed up and automate certain things, right? And it allows you to develop. So if there isn't a tool that does what you want, you can create one to do it for you. Hence my Pokemon Go forensics tool that I think wasn't something out there. We could integrate that into Axiom or something else because they can actually ingest Python code and parse that for us. Understand scripting language about Python. Participation in CTFs. Today's April 5th. Belkasoft, who's another computer forensic vendor, they actually have a CTF. And they actually have really good scenario-based CTFs. They're free to participate in. They usually give you a free trial and license. They give you questions and answers, and then you can just try it yourself. Magnet Forensics, they also just did one not that long ago, but they archive them and you're able to go back and do it yourself so you can get the practice that you need. And there are others out there.
It's a great way to get experience when you don't have experience now.
Engage in the forensic community, very big, like on LinkedIn, like all these memes you're seeing, like a lot of them are from folks that like we at least know of on LinkedIn, right? Like they do funny stuff, this is not our own generated content. But like engaging in the forensic community, because things are always changing, you'll find out new things, you'll find out new artifacts, new tools, techniques, things of that nature. And then just your own research and actually trying it yourself. There's no experience like hands-on experience. And I know we're in a college, I know I work for a college, I know I have a master's degree, but I'll tell you, that experience will be much more valuable in the long run than your actual certifications or degrees or anything of that nature, right? I said we had to use this one. So like this is from, again, this is from a guy, if you're on LinkedIn, you're interested in forensics, look up Alexis Brignoni. This is a meme from him, so give him some credit. But yeah, when they tell you digital forensics is a lot of Googling things, you insulted my entire field of knowledge, but yes. So
the resources up here, they're really great resources, free training. There's CTFs, there's 2 CTFs up there that you can do. YouTube.com for 13Q, that's actually Ryan's friend. He does a lot of great forensic intro to forensic videos. Check out the Sam's blogs, and also there's a Discord, it's like Discord for digital forensics as well, and great community out there. So definitely take a picture of that. So.
And with that, that's going to be our presentation. We're ending 1 minute after time, but we did have 5 minutes taken from us. So I think that's fair, ladies and gentlemen. Any questions from the group? Question? Yes, ma'am.
What about the app tracking location thing? But you know, some apps when you first get them, they'll be like, you can ask the app not to track or request that they only use location when you're in the app or not at all.
Yeah.
That's just for show, right? Like they can still track even.
There's still going to be metadata, and they're not tracking it purposefully, and they're not going to send that out to like customers or other partners and stuff. So.
But you guys could still find that needed.
There's other, so like, well, let's ask, while you're using a specific app and it says, hey, I don't want you to track this app, there's other things on your device that is tracking as well. And like, that's like native system applications, so that's like not for like Facebook to see, you know? So it's like, hey, Facebook, don't look at this, please, but Apple's still collecting all that. And that's where the patterns of life comes in. Like we can see when you open up a flashlight, when you are looking at another screen, when you have multiple windows up for multiple apps, I know what you're looking at, I know what you're about to type. I'm telling you, it's really creepy and it's full view.
It really is. This wasn't my case, this is someone else's case that I remember was talking about, and I'm just going to share it very briefly, but it was a Windows laptop and the same concept. The guy's like, yeah, I didn't do this because I didn't have my laptop on or anything like that, but they look at the Windows artifact called SRUM, or System Resource Usage Monitor, and they would say, well, actually, like we can see that your Wi-Fi card and your battery are active. Now, we may not understand the context so much, but we can understand that that's on. Right? Like we understand, well, hey, your laptop is actually in use, it doesn't show off. Like, well, that's contrary to your story now. So we can actually use just simple things like that to kind of help push along the investigations and the lead. But and to also kind of answer your question, what is the definition of track? Is tracking me recording GPS data and putting it into a database, or is tracking me recording a database and sending it out? I don't know. That's for the lawyers to figure out, right? So a lot of those types of things may occur in that nature too, right? So.
Yeah, go ahead. You know, I'm just saying, like, even when you download like a random app, like a flashlight app or a calculator app, you may not think like it's that intrusive. Like ads are intrusive. Ads will actually locate your data. So when you turn that flashlight on and an ad pops up, there's stuff being sent back and forth to other servers where it'll actually pick up on, hey, this is the GPS location. We actually had a homicide case where somebody, after they got killed, after they killed somebody, they went and dig and put them in the hole and use a flashlight at that time for this long duration. And that ad, there was an ad on that app, and it tracked his GPS, and that's how we found him.
Got routed out by his flashlight, Look at that. Think about that. Rob, you had a question?
Yes, so like on one of the earlier slides, I saw that virtual machine mentioned. So if you use a virtual machine and you close out of it, are you saying that like there's still a way to find whatever you were doing on that instance?
So yeah, I mean, I'll answer, then if you wants to add to that, that's fine. So think of a virtual machine as just like any other computer. Remember, it's just an operating system on someone else's hardware. Now, assuming for a second we're talking about enterprise infrastructure and something like a VMware, we can get direct access from VMware side, the VMDK and the VNet, right? That's the memory, that's the file that represents the memory for that VM, and the VMDK is the disk file that represents the data on there. We can extract that and process that very normally in forensic tools. in the event that we can't get access to that, we can get whatever tools onto that system and we can collect it like we would normally any other system. You would still have to go through the proper like data destruction procedures if you want to really truly get rid of that. Anything done?
Yeah, just like you said, I mean, just like if it's like a little virtual machine you're running off of VMware or something like that, we can.
We found those, like, I remember we did cases like, oh, you got VirtualBox on here, let's see what's on your system too, on that system, and like, oh, you're doing a lot of your activity that we're trying to investigate, that's why we couldn't find it on your main host, because they're doing it on the VM, but when it looks across the network, it looks like it's coming from that actual host, but it's really being passed from the virtual machine to their host to out to wherever it's going.
Because when he says zero out, he means like go into your hex and just wipe everything. That's the only way for us to not wipe stuff.
Any other questions? With no other questions, we'll be here for a few more minutes. Did you have one? I'm sorry, I was already in. No, okay. So we'll be here for a few minutes if you decide you want to. I want to thank you all for being here today. I hope it was informative. I hope it was instructive. I hope you learned something. And if it's something you want to consider as a career, it's a lot of fun. There could be a lot of high impact for it. And you know what? There will always be something to learn because it's ever changing. So with that, we'll see you on the next one and let us know if you have any questions, all right?